Okay, so I am going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Carissa, and I will be facilitating our webinar today, Healing Hearts. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. For those that are just logging on, I am going to kind of walk through what to expect for our presentation today. So I'm going to be going over the different developmental levels of understanding of what kids know and are able to understand about death and dying and their own personal experience with grief, as well as giving lots of different tips and techniques and some guidance on how to answer big questions from your kids at home, how to talk about death and dying with your child or your teen, and different techniques and coping tools and projects that you can do as a family to support their grief during this experience. So thank you for being here today. I know many, if not all of you here today are here due to unfortunate circumstances. And so first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for your bravery in showing up here today. And I just hope that some of the knowledge that I can share with you today will be helpful to you and your family during this time. So thank you for being here. So Hearts Connected is a professional organization focused on supporting children through various circumstances. So it could be a grief experience, or it could be a hospitalization, a new diagnosis, divorce, a parent who is currently being deployed. Lots of different stressful and various experiences that our staff at Hearts Connected is able to support children through. We are primarily staffed with child life specialists. And if you haven't heard of what a child life specialist is we are certified and clinically trained in the developmental impact that an illness or an injury, trauma, or grief can have on a child or a teen. So we're able to use this knowledge and this understanding to create different therapeutic interventions to support children throughout their difficult experience in the hospital environment, as well as beyond the hospital, to support them psychosocially and emotionally. So Hearts Connected was founded by Dee Dee Fritz, and she was actually a pediatric nurse for over 30 years, where she was able to see the power and magic of child life. And she really saw a gap in care of child life services being available to her patients once they would discharge from the hospital. So she wanted to create an organization that was able to bridge that gap and provide child life services outside of the hospital environment and make it accessible to children once they discharge from the hospital, as well as to families who may not even have a hospital experience for their child, but are just seeking out child life services. So that's how Hearts Connected began. And again, excuse me, my name is Carissa Menard, and I have over 5 years of experience working in a hospital environment. My specialties in my career have been working with rehab patients, so spinal cord and brain injury kiddos, as well as throughout my graduate program, I worked under the community educator and bereavement specialist, where I was able to help to facilitate and create the therapeutic grief activities for our grief camp that we hosted every year, as well as the resources for staff and parents at our hospital. So I wanted to do a quick poll. We have quite a few people here today, and since we are a national organization, we have people here from all over the US. So I wanted to just put a quick poll up to see if we have any similarities on parents and caregivers who are here of children of a certain age group. So just take a few moments to answer what age or what different ages your children at home are that you are here to be supporting today. And then just so you know as well, our chat box is open. I sent out an email yesterday to everybody just asking for you to submit your questions beforehand if you would like to. But I really want this to be an open and safe space for you to feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation. So I'll be providing a lot of information, and I won't be stopping for questions until the very end. So as questions come up, just put them in the chat. while I'm presenting. And at the very end of the presentation, I will go through all of the questions and answer them to the best of my ability. So please feel free to answer, or please feel free to ask any questions that you have throughout our presentation today. I'm going to give a couple more seconds for a few more people to answer. Okay, so it looks like the majority of our participants today have children in multiple age groups, and then our next closest is our school-aged kiddos. So, and then we also have ones from preschool through adolescence, so all different ages, but primarily children in multiple age groups. And this is a great presentation that will be addressing all of those different developmental stages. So I am glad that we have lots of info for all of those different types of age groups for you today. So, just to kind of start off broadly, how do children grieve? So, just like adults, every child grieves differently and uniquely. And even amongst siblings, it can be surprising sometimes to see your children grieve very different as siblings. This is also very normal. And then we can also be surprised sometimes by the expectations that we might put on our child or teen on what we think they may grieve like based off of their temperament or their personality style, but then their grief expression is very different. So grief is very unique, and grief also is unique to the different types of death that a child is experiencing. So they may have had a grandparent die in the past or a pet, and for their grief experience now, whatever it may be, they may be expressing their grief very differently. This is also very normal. Our grief experiences can change and transform throughout different developmental stages, as well as different types of death experiences. Grief also takes time. So we may see grief show up right away. We may see it show up later. And grief will also change and transform throughout a child's different stage of life. Grief can also come in waves. So we often call them like grief nuggets or grief spurts with young kids. And we see lots of young kiddos who will appear to not really be understanding what's going on, but then all of a sudden have a big outburst of like emotion and grief, and then all of a sudden go right back to playing with their toys again. And it can look really confusing to people who haven't worked with children who are grieving, but this is also very normal because children don't have the emotional and cognitive capacity to be able to really feel the deep feelings of grief for long extended periods of time. So they have these grief spurts or these grief waves. We also see this in teens because the adolescent population will very often try to like internalize their emotions before they're able to outwardly express them or put words to them. This is also very normal. So grief comes in waves for children, and even as you as like the parent or the caregiver, you may also be experiencing grief in waves, very normal across the developmental stages. And then just like I was saying, it changes throughout life as well. So what do children understand, and how do they express grief based off of this understanding? So, to start off with our infants and toddlers, they are able to understand the absence of someone. So, they don't understand bodily functions, obviously. They don't understand what death means or have a sense of time, but they do understand that there's someone who they love, or there's someone who they feel safe with and trust that is no longer there. And so, with this type of awareness that babies and toddlers have, they have lots of expressions like crying, changes in their sleeping patterns, changes in their digestion and their eating. All of these things are their body and their emotional way of sharing and showing you. I don't feel safe. I feel nervous and scared because I'm missing someone that was that safety net for me or helped me to feel safe. We also often see lots of babies and toddlers regress developmentally. So maybe your baby at home was able to finally go down for a nap without being held the whole time, and now they're needing to be held or rocked until falling asleep. or maybe your toddler was just beginning to transition out of using a pacifier and now they're wanting their pacifier again. All of these things are normal, and it's that child's way of kind of rebuilding their understanding of feeling safe in their world and trusting their environment when they've experienced the loss and the absence of someone who was able to fill that sense of trust. So they'll often kind of replay these old behaviors to kind of rebuild that sense of trust and safety. So very normal. And then lastly, separation anxiety. So we see lots of babies and toddlers who really want to cling close to their living parent or their living caregiver because they don't know and don't understand how the other person who they had this sense of safety and love and trust for is no longer there. And so they really cling to the adults that are around them to be able to provide that sense of safety for them. For our preschool aged kids, they are able to understand the absence of someone, and they are able to just begin understanding some bodily functions. So preschoolers are just starting to learn about their heart and how it beats, about their lungs, about how they have this thing called a brain inside of their head. They're learning about how their body works. They don't quite have a concrete understanding of it yet, but they're learning about it. But what preschool aged kids do not understand yet is a sense of permanency and a sense of time. So preschool aged kids are able to maybe know what the word died and dead means, and that it means that the body isn't working. They're just kind of beginning to grasp those types of understandings, but they don't understand that death is permanent and that what the word forever means and what the word forever feels like. They haven't been able to build that cognitive understanding yet. So with this lack of understanding of permanency, we'll often see really like big emotions in preschoolers. And this is because they are building this understanding. And so as they're building this awareness of, oh my gosh, my person that I, love is no longer here and will not be here tomorrow, will not be here forever. As they're building this understanding, big emotions can come up. And this doesn't mean that we shy away from teaching preschool aged kids about death and about what happened and about the permanency of death. This is actually really a great opportunity for us as the trusted caregivers in that child's life to begin teaching them what death is, what forever means, and providing a safe space for them to learn about it, to ask questions, and to seek out that safety and support that they need while they're building this understanding of permanency. We also often see a lot of repeated questions. So, a lot of the kids that I worked with in the hospital, sometimes when they would go home, parents would contact me and say, hey, I know you explained to my child that, their sister died and what happened. However, now they keep asking me where their sister is, and they don't seem to really be understanding what you explained to them. This is also very normal because, again, with this whole building of awareness of permanency and sense of time, children are continuing to learn this by asking questions. So just because they're asking questions doesn't mean that it was explained wrong. It doesn't mean that you said something wrong or their therapist said something wrong. It's that this child is continuing to rebuild and re-solidify what they are learning and understanding about death and permanency. We also see lots of regression in preschool aged kids for the very same reason as our babies and toddlers. They're building that sense of safety and understanding of their world again through replaying some old behaviors to help to teach themselves what to expect when they are doing those behaviors or how someone will respond to those behaviors. We'll see lots of preschool aged kiddos play out death. For lots of adults, this can look kind of scary or like alarming when they're not used to supporting a child who is grieving and their child is having very violent play or having lots of different dramatic play that involves death and dying. But this is actually very normal because kids, their main language is play. They don't have the verbal and the cognitive abilities yet to be able to express and share what death is for them, what death means for them, what they're feeling and experiencing. They play it out. And a lot of kids too use play to be able to build their understanding of the world. So they'll play out hypothetical situations and then respond to them to be able to learn what to expect in life when these situations happen. And so when a child is experience some experiencing something new or experiencing a death in their life, they will often play out that experience repeatedly to be able to kind of solidify what that means for them and practice how to respond in different ways to support themselves. We also see separation anxiety, and we can also see delayed grief in preschool aged kids as well. And this is because while they're building this understanding of permanency and sense of time, when that kind of starts to become more solidified and um, more concrete for them, we could see some delayed grief come up for them when they really do understand, oh my goodness, my person that I love is not coming back and I'm not going to see them again. And so delayed grief can also be really common in our preschool aged kiddos. For school age, they are able to understand bodily functions. They're able to understand how our body works. They're able to understand what death means when our body is no longer working, when our heart stops beating, our lungs stop breathing. They're able to understand these more concrete concepts. And they're also just beginning to understand sense of time and permanency. So between around ages 5 to 7, this is really being built and solidified. So the older school aged kids, usually from 7 to 12, they really do have a pretty concrete understanding of time and permanency. So with this awareness of death is permanent, death is forever, we can see lots of different things come up. So one of those could also be playing out death. So they're playing out their experience very similar to preschool aged kids. We can see a lot of needing of reassurance. So lots of school aged kids, because they understand that death is permanent, they also need lots of reassurance that you as the living caregiver are going to be okay to take care of them. They may need reassurance that the other people around them are safe and they're okay, because they may have fear of losing someone else permanently as well. And this doesn't mean that we shy away from sharing with kids what is happening because we're fearful of them having these anxieties and fears. No matter what we share with kids, they're going to be experiencing that like internally because they've lost someone that they love. And so, again, it's a chance for us to step in as the adults in their life to help to educate and reassure them that you are safe, that they are being cared for, and that you will be by their side throughout this experience. We also often see lots of nightmares come up for school aged kiddos. If nightmares are happening, pretty consistently for more than 6 months or so after the death has happened, this may be a sign that your child is needing some further therapeutic support. Nightmares are very common in general, especially during those first few months, but continued nightmares for a long period of time could be more of a sign of some trauma that has occurred or some need for further support. We also will often see difficulty concentrating in school aged kiddos and changes in their school performance. And this can be two different ways. We'll often see kiddos who become a perfectionist because they want to make sure that they have some type of control over their environment. And we sometimes see kids who are lacking in their participation in school because they're distracted, they're struggling like emotionally. And so we'll see lots of different changes happen in school performance. And so it's really important for us to share with the teachers and the school staff what is happening and different things that can be used to support your child while they're at school. And then lastly, for the adolescent population, so they have a concrete understanding at this stage about death, about bodily functions, permanency, and time. And they actually have an adult level understanding of death itself and the experience of grief. The only thing different from adults for adolescents is that they don't quite have that the understanding of spirituality and meaning of life. And this is because in this stage, the adolescent population is building their sense of their sense of their identity, their sense of who they are in the world, what they mean to the world, what they can contribute to the world, and what those around them also contribute to them. And so, with this lack of sense of meaning and lack of spirituality, we can see lots of different things come up for our teens as well. So we'll see lots of mood changes, lots of acting out. And as we know, our adolescents at home are likely already having these things happen, lots of mood changes, lots of stress and anxiety, which is normal hormonally and just through this kind of stage of life. But when you add in grief in the mix of it, it can kind of exacerbate those things as well. We see lots of teens searching for that sense of meaning. So maybe doing more active conversations, more journaling, more like internalization, because they're building that sense of awareness and that sense of meaning of who they are in the world. And so we'll see lots of teens start to kind of withdraw because they're really kind of looking within themselves to figure out, what does this death mean for me? Who am I now with this death experience? And so withdrawing is also very normal. If we have teens who are significantly withdrawn for more than 6 months after the death, this may also be a sign for further therapeutics support for your child, just to assess for like depression and things like that. However, withdrawing itself as a symptom of grief throughout just those first few months and just kind of periodically as well, long term, is very normal as that teen is looking within themselves to build their sense of identity and their sense of meaning in the world through this death experience. We'll also see lots of teens kind of start to potentially test their sense of mortality. And so I always share this with parents, not to, make parents scared that their child is going to be doing, risky behaviors or things like that, but more so just for you to be more like aware of it, so that you can have an open conversation with your teen at home about, hey, you might be wondering, what mortality means for you. And I want you to always come to me before you start to do any like risky behaviors or test your sense of mortality. I want you to always come to me first and let your teen know that, hey, I noticed that this may be a thought that you may have, and you create an open and an honest place for your teen to come to you and share those thoughts and concerns with you before they test them themselves. So this can also be a common thing that we see with teens. Teens are also very egocentric. So, because they're building their sense of identity in the world, they are experiencing what they feel like is the biggest grief experience in the room. And that's because while they're building this sense of identity, um, they feel like the world revolves around them while they're building this sense of who they are. And so your teen at home may not be as empathetic towards you and your grief, or towards their siblings and their grief. They may not be able to fully understand what someone else might be going through. And this doesn't mean that your child is being, inconsiderate, or that your teen is not wanting to be empathetic, or your teen is not being an understanding human of what others might be going through in their grief experience with the same loss. But it's just something developmentally that teens go through. And so it's really common for teens to feel like their grief experience is the biggest one. This is not them being selfish. It's them building their sense of identity of who they are now with this death. We also see lots of teens express a sense of hopelessness. And this is because as teens are building their sense of who they are, they're also building their sense of their future and what their future looks like. And while they're in this critical stage developmentally of building out what they want their future to be, and then a death happens of someone that is significant in their life, it can really alter and change what they pictured their future looking like. And so we can see a lot of sense of hopelessness in teens. And we can also see a lot of guilt and confusion come up. And this is because since teens are able to have the abstract understanding of the world, which means they are now cognitively able to see that we can change the different causes to create different effects. So we can say things differently to someone to change how things turn out. We can do things differently to change a certain outcome because they're able to have this cognitive awareness now of being able to change their environment. We can see lots of teens have lots of guilt surrounding, I wish I was able to share with my person this thing, or I wish I was able to say something to my person, or I wish I didn't get so mad at them last week. And lots of confusion surrounding, how could this have happened if this maybe changed? And so, because they have this awareness, they can kind of have a lot of this push and pull of guilt and confusion surrounding the death. So this was a lot of information just about all the different developmental stages of children and what they are able to understand about grief and how those expressions come up. A brief overview for all of the different developmental stages. What is really critical to know is these 6 things. So whenever we are supporting grieving children, no matter what age they are, we want to always be honest. So we never want to lie or shy away from sharing with our child what has happened. And I'm going to go into more detail about what that looks like for each stage of development, but we always want to be honest. And why this is so important is because when a child is going through the loss of someone and they experience also that loss of safety of that person that was able to provide that for them, they're looking to other people to create and restabilize that sense of safety and trust in their world. And if they experience that the other adults in their life are not being completely truthful, it can really hinder that development or that redevelopment of that sense of safety and trust. Children want to be acknowledged and be included. So even as young as our toddlers, giving them the chance to choose if they would like to come to the funeral or not, to choose if they want to go up to the casket or not, to choose if they want to write a letter to their person who has died or not. So acknowledging that their experience is real and that they are also going through something and giving them the chance to be included or not be included. Children also need to be given permission, and this can look 2 different ways. So it can be something as simple as literally sitting down with your child and just giving them permission to grieve, giving them permission to ask questions and to not be afraid to share their thoughts or confusion or their fears or even their big emotions. Permission can also be you as the adult grieving openly to show them that it is safe to grieve with me. It is safe to grieve as a family. It's safe to show your emotions. It's a safe space here at home or with me as your adult and caregiver to grieve openly. And so even just showing like our own emotions as the adults in their life can give a child permission to know that, okay, if they are able to show their emotions, then I can too. We also want to give children intentional opportunity to express their emotions. So this could be some of the different projects that I will be sharing with you throughout this presentation that you can do at home. It could be having your child see a therapist or a play therapist to intentionally have time to talk or play out their experience. It could be working with someone here at Heart Connected to be able to maybe learn more about what death is or process their death experience and their grief through a therapeutic activity. But finding ways to create an opportunity that is intentional for your child to express their grief. Support to go on living and return to a routine is so important for all age groups, especially the younger kids. So when they are going through a new experience that can cause a lot of stress and anxiety and new emotions, we want to try to keep the external environment as stable and routine as possible. So giving your child the chance to go to their soccer game again, go to ballet class, do the things that they enjoy and love, and try to have people in your life help to facilitate those types of routines again, so that those things can happen and life can continue to move on while they're also experiencing and processing their grief. And lastly, Make sure that we have no time scale. So I mentioned a couple of times about how there's certain things that we want to look out for, like withdrawing and nightmares that may last for more than 6 months. Those are just some signs of potential need for further support. But grief expressions and grief itself has no time scale. So especially for kids as they continue to grow older and learn more and understand more and kind of build these new understandings that I just went over with you, um, they will have different expressions of grief. And so their grief is going to change and transform throughout the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And so just to have no time scale placed on their grief is so important. So, with all of that said, on what we are able to understand of what kids understand about each about death based on each developmental stage and how they express grief, here are a lot of different techniques that you can do at home with your child based off of all of those things that we just went over developmentally. So for infants and toddlers, again, we want to maintain a routine as best as possible. And this may require you to reach out for like some support from people to help to maintain that routine while you're also going through your own grief and you need time to be able to step away and rest and work through your own emotions as well. Comfort items that smell like their person can be really important for infants and toddlers because they have this awareness of their world through their five senses. Just having something that smells like their person who they have lost is very comforting for them. Being a safe space for big emotions. So, as we talked about, they may have big emotions come up as they're processing and trying to grapple with the awareness that their person is not here anymore. And then using words like died and dead with toddlers. So, our infants obviously aren't able to have an understanding of what those words mean yet, but our toddlers can just begin to start learning about what the words died and dead mean. So while we're explaining death to a toddler, using those words is really important. And this is because we don't want to use metaphorical terms that can be confusing for kids as they're building their vocabulary and building their understanding of the world. So words like passed away, went to sleep, no longer here, those are all really confusing words because they're used in other ways and other conversations. And so it can be really confusing for kids to build their vocabulary of what those words really mean. And it can also cause a lot of fear of falling asleep or when dad goes away to the grocery store because that word was also used in the same terminology for a death experience. So we want to create that black and white concrete understanding of how death is different than those things like passed away, sleep, and gone away. Preschool aged kids, grief books are a great way to prompt a discussion with your child. So as you know, it can be really difficult to just sit down with your preschooler at home and have a deep conversation because cognitively they're not able to. And they also, like emotionally, have to be in a safe space to be able to want to have those talks with you. And so, a book that talks about grief and talks about dying is a great way for you to developmentally facilitate a conversation around death and kind of to ask questions. What do you think it means when this child in like this book is crying over their mom who died? Or how do you feel when you read this book with me? Just kind of creating a safe space for you to be able to ask questions and a safe space for your child to ask questions while reading the book to learn about death and dying. At the very end of this presentation, I'll be sending out an email that's going to have lots of different links to different resources for you, as well as some book recommendations as well. So you'll see those in my follow-up email. Preschoolers also need a safe space for big emotions, very similar to our younger toddler and babies. And then another fun activity could be decorating a picture frame. So using just a fun and simple way for your child to engage in some creative expression. to decorate a picture frame to memorialize and recognize their person who has died. Using honest language like died, dead, not alive anymore. And then also now starting to build upon their sense of permanency and that sense of forever by saying, will not see blank again. And that can sound really harsh. And as the person who has also lost someone, really hard to say out loud. However, this is so important for our preschool aged kids for them to really build a concrete understanding of what they're experiencing so that there's no confusion, there's no misconceptions or fears, and that they're able to appropriately process their experience. And then something for all of the different age groups is having a special day planned. So having something special to look forward to, especially when they're going through something so difficult emotionally that can bring up lots of negative emotions and hard emotions. Having a special day to look forward to that they can plan for and be excited about can be really therapeutic for preschool age kids all the way through adolescence. School aged kids, some helpful activities that you can try at home is to create a memory box or book. This is also a great activity for teens. And this is therapeutic in two different ways. So the first way is that having a memory book or a box made is just a really significant and special way for your child or your teen at home to be able to collect and hold on to and recognize and memorialize their person who has died. It gives them that sense of control to be able to hold on to some of those tangible items. And then, secondly, it's very therapeutic because it gives a physical space for that child or that teen to open up their grief and then close it. So it gives your child the freedom to choose, okay, I really want to think about my mom right now, or I really want to think about my grandpa right now. So I'm going to go and open up my memory box, maybe cry, maybe smile and laugh and look through it. And then when I'm done, I'm going to close it and I'm going to put that back where it was. And so it's a therapeutic way for kids and teens to be able to have their grief be opened and then closed when they're ready. Having a question or a worry box is really helpful for school-aged kids because they now have a better understanding of death and dying and permanency. They're going to have a lot of questions come up on what this means for them. Lots of worries come up about people in their life, about like their own sense of like mortality and death and what this means for their body. And so having a worry box be a safe space for your child to ask questions and to write them down and then to open it, once a week and read through them all together is a really helpful way for your child to feel safe to ask lots of questions. Using grief books are also really helpful for school-aged kids. Activity books are also really great. There's many activity books online that are free for your child to be able to journal with some prompts or color different things and use creative expression to process their grief. And then lastly, one of my favorite activities is a heart emotions coloring activity. So it's literally just printing out a large picture of a heart, pulling out some markers or crayons or like whatever else you would like your child to use, and doing it with them separately and just drawing what does your heart feel and using colors or different items, sparkles, whatever it may be, to show what their heart is feeling. This is a great way for kids to express how they're feeling their grief because they, again, don't quite have the verbal ability to tell you how they're feeling, but they may be able to show you through color or through a drawing or things like that. And so this is a really therapeutic way for your child to show their grief. And then it's a great way for you to just kind of ask questions of, I wonder what what the color red means on there. Or, oh, I see that a lot of your heart is colored green. Just pointing out and noticing things and seeing if your child is wanting to share more or not. But either way, it's therapeutic for them to have a non-verbal way of showing their grief and what their heart is feeling. And then lastly, For the adolescents, some helpful activities could be making a dream catcher. So again, because they're building that sense of what their future looks like, and they're kind of rebuilding their sense of identity and what their future is going to look like now. A dream catcher can be really therapeutic for your child to rebuild those dreams or re-solidify that those dreams are still possible. Writing a letter to their person is very therapeutic. I'm a huge, big advocate for support groups, especially for preschool and school age kids, but especially so for our teens. Their main form of learning about the world now is through their peers, and building a sense of who they are is also through their peers during this time. And so a support group can be really helpful to decrease that sense of isolation while they're building that sense of identity, and just kind of create a sense of community while they're going through their grief. And then lastly, practicing what to say to friends is really important for our teens when they are going back to school after the death of their person. Practicing what to say when someone asks them randomly in like the hallway, oh, I heard someone, died last month. Who was it? Or how did your mom die? Or how are you doing today? Just kind of practicing some of those responses can be really helpful for teens to kind of know what to expect when they go back to school, and also give them that sense of control of, okay, I know what to say to these questions. I know how to respond when I'm not feeling comfortable with certain questions, and I feel prepared and in control of this, small area of my grief experience. And so that's a really helpful thing for teens too. So 4 main things just to really take away for how to respond to big questions, not just about grief, but in general for kids. Um, the 4 things that we always want to do when kids ask really big questions or maybe uncomfortable questions is to acknowledge, affirm, ask questions, and be there. And this comes from Dr. Lauren Starnes. She has an incredible book that I highly recommend called Big Conversations with Little Children. And to kind of break down these 4 things, it's really important, one, to acknowledge that your child has asked you a question. So we never want to ignore a question that our child asks, even if it's something that is uncomfortable or maybe not appropriate for the certain social environment. We always want to acknowledge that, hey, I noticed you, I hear you asking me a question. If we don't acknowledge it, it can create a sense of shame for our child, a sense of fear to ever ask you questions again. Secondly, for affirming, we want to let our child know verbally and show them, I hear you. Thank you for asking this question. So an example of affirming a child in, maybe you are at like a dinner party and your child asks you a question about your person who has died, and it's not really the appropriate time to answer it right then and there. So we want to acknowledge, hey, I hear you asking a question about your dad who died last month. Affirming, I'm so glad that you asked me that question. Right now, I'm enjoying some dinner with friends, but we'll make sure to talk about this later once we go home. So affirming that it's okay that you asked this question. I'm not going to answer it right now, but we will talk about it. And thank you for feeling comfortable to ask me that big question. So those 2 steps are really so critical in helping kids to feel safe and trusting in being able to ask the question. Once the conversation starts and we respond to a child, we don't necessarily want to respond with an answer to their question. What's really helpful is we actually want to respond to their question with a question. So if your child, for example, asks you, I was just thinking about dad yesterday. Why did he die? Asking a question back and saying, why do you think he died? Or what do you think it means that dad died? So asking a question back provides a space for you to learn about maybe why your child is just kind of randomly asking you this question, what your child maybe is able to understand or maybe has a misconception about. And it gives you more information to know how to better respond to their first big question. And then lastly, being present and being there. So making sure that you have the time and space dedicated to really kind of fish out and learn about what this big question is and to support your child through it while they're asking questions and responding to your questions. So I wanted to briefly go over some years of firsts. So what do we do during these first experiences that our children and teens will go through? Our first birthday without their person, the anniversary date of their death, maybe the first Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah without them. How do we support our child through these things? So for holidays and milestones, the four main things that we want to do is number one, plan for special support, not only for your child, but also for yourself. So recognizing that this may be a difficult thing for you as well, and what do you need as the caregiver to feel supported by family or friends or faith or processing to be able to also then be there for your child. Simply asking your child, hey, what do you think about this day coming up, and seeing if they need special support and what they want. Communicating needs, sharing with your child is so important about what you're going to need also. So asking your child, how are you feeling? What do you need for this first birthday without your dad or without your mom or your sister to feel loved and supported. And also sharing your needs. This is going to be like, for example, this is going to be a really hard day for mommy. And so I may need lots of extra hugs, or I may need to go to my bedroom just for a few minutes to think about your dad. Simply sharing what your needs are is so important. Reminiscing, so not being afraid to talk about the person who has died and reminiscing about good memories and bad memories and things that make you laugh and cry. And lastly, new traditions and rituals. So coming up with new things for your family that are special as a new tradition to do once your person has died. And so that might be setting the table at Thanksgiving and having a chair set up that is for that person, or having a candle lit, or for every birthday releasing a bunch of balloons, lots of different things that you can choose as a family on things that can recognize your person who has died. So one question that I get pretty often is, how do I support my child with visiting the grave or the mausoleum or a cemetery? How does that experience look, and when is it appropriate for kids to come? And my answer is always to, number one, give your child the choice, even as young as our toddlers. So just sharing, hey, we are going to so-and-so's grave or so-and-so's burial site, or we're going to go spread their ashes, or whatever it might be. Do you want to come? Giving them the choice first is so important. Second, we want to explain what is happening and what it means. So explaining what a gravesite is, what a burial place is, explaining what a casket is, and reassuring them that you are going to be there, supporting them, and making them feel safe throughout that whole experience. Thirdly, make it memorable. Make it a special experience by maybe at the gravesite having a little picnic there, or writing a letter to leave, or picking flowers to leave. Trying to work with your child to find out what's going to be memorable and special for them when they're visiting the gravesite for the first time. And lastly, having them bring a comfort item. So for young kids, it's like the obvious things like a stuffed animal, blankie, pacifier, things like that. And for the older kids, it may be a best friend. And I know it can be maybe off-putting to bring a friend to something so intimate to the family. But for a school-aged or a teen, their best friend may be their comfort person or their comfort item of some kind that is able to provide that sense of safety for this new experience. So some grief activities that I'm going to go over with you all. I'm going to be doing grief activities and then coping activities. These 2 grief activities that I will be sharing will be 2 options of ways to process grief with your child or your teen. The first one is memory bracelets. So having your child pick out lots of different types of beads that signify the different traits or memories of their person who has died. And it's something that they're able to wear and carry with them. For younger kids, since they may not have the grasp to be able to bead and string beads, using paint or colored pens or markers and things like that can also provide the same therapeutic outlet for them to be able to show creatively what their person means to them. And then I already mentioned this one, but for a memory box or book, some things to put inside are photographs, cards and letters, special items, jewelry, clothing, different things that are special to them and recognize who their person is and what they meant to them. So coping activities are going to be focused more so on how to help your child process the emotions involved with grief and how to restabilize those big emotions that can come up. So the first one is called cool down cubes. And one of the things that you can do is buy these little plastic cubes, or you can use popsicle sticks, you can use tokens, but some type of item that is within a jar that you can write many different types of healthy coping responses. So some examples are asking for a hug, taking 5 deep breaths, journaling, singing a song, dancing for 2 minutes, lots of different things that you and your child can come up with that they also want to do, and having them be in this jar. And when those big emotions come up, whether it's in the car, at home, you have this little jar handy or a few little popsicle sticks handy with you, and your child can choose, okay, what can I do in this moment to kind of restabilize my nervous system while I'm experiencing these big emotions? A coping toolbox is one of my favorite things for kids, no matter what they are going through, whether it's grief or just a stressful life experience, because it gives kids many sensory ways to calm their nervous system. So in our coping toolbox, we always want to have things that address the 5 senses. So something that feels good, smells good, maybe something that tastes good, like a peppermint candy or like a lollipop. Different things that are able to tap into the senses that provide a positive sensory experience for your child to kind of calm them and work through and process their emotions in a healthy physical way. Some of my favorite tools to put in are Play-Doh. So Play-Doh is a great way for even teens just to kind of squeeze out tension and to have a tension release experience. Bubbles are a great way to help a child learn how to take deep breaths. So we have to breathe through our nose and slowly breathe out, because if we blow too hard, the bubble will pop. So bubbles are a great way for kids to learn how to do slow, deep inhales and slow, deep exhales. And then lastly, essential oils are just a really great way to kind of bring kids into a sensory experience that is really pleasing, because our sense of smell is one of our greatest senses that is connected to memories. And so if we can create a positive sense of smell experience, it can kind of also really calm and support the nervous system too. So we want to make sure that you do not feel like you are on your own in supporting your child through their grief experience. So we are here to help you and your child as well as your family. We offer at Hearts Connected one-on-one video sessions as well as phone consultations for you and your child that can provide many different things. So it may look like emotional support, it may be a therapeutic activity, it may be you just needing further education and guidance on how to teach your child about what happened or about what death means. Building coping skills with your child. There's lots of different things that we can do for you and for your child to further support you throughout this whole time. We do we do offer a free phone consultation. So it's a free 15-minute phone call, and you can book that through our website just to be able to learn more about what our services look like, to discuss your child's current history and kind of what they are going through. And then we can kind of talk you through ways that we can further support you and your child. So we're here for you. You are not on your own. So please reach out for help if you feel like it's needed for you and your family. So questions and comments, I want to make sure that I leave time for, I have a few more minutes, leave time for everybody to ask any questions that they may have. I'm just going to pull up the chat box to see if anybody has asked any questions. None yet. While people are asking questions, if you would like to, in the chat box, here is our contact information. So you can email me at carissa@heartsconnected.org, or our general email is also listed here. Our website is www.heartsconnected.org. And then our phone number here is also listed for you. And then I have a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And even if it's something like a specific question about your child and what they are going through in their grief experience, I am here to answer any of those questions as well. So I'll give a few minutes for people to answer. If anyone is logging off, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate your time and showing up here in this space for today. And I hope that what I shared with you today was helpful and supportive to you and your family during this time. You are so welcome, Maria. I'm going to give one more minute for people to ask any questions. You're welcome. I'm so glad that it was helpful for you, Michelle. Oh, so many thank yous. Thank you so much for sharing your gratitude with me. It was a privilege to be here today. And like I said, I know that these conversations are tough. And so it truly is a privilege to be able to be here today and speak with you about what your child may be going through. So thank you again for being here today. And it was so nice to meet all of you virtually. I will be sending out a follow-up email with some of those with some of the resources that I mentioned. And if you have any questions, please feel free to respond to that message. And I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. And thank you for your time.